I don't get at all the Albanese government's foreign policies, by the way. You've got Donald Trump now being sworn in as US President next week, and representing Australia will be Foreign Minister Penny Wong, who's accused him of trashing alliances for personal political interests, and Ambassador Kevin Rudd has said even worse about him, called Trump the most destructive president in history, a man who drags American democracy through the mud. Meanwhile, the government on another front is sending Attorney General Mark Dreyfus to Israel this month to try and repair relations there. But what an insult. I mean, Dreyfus is just going because he's Jewish, and I suppose that's meant to fool Israel into somehow forgiving the Australian government for backing an international warrant for the arrest of Israel's Prime Minister, and for banning a visit by Israel's former Justice Minister, and for being weak in fighting Jew hatred here, and for Dreyfus himself not backing a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism at our universities. But hey, don't worry about all that. Dreyfus is Jewish. You like them. You like them, don't you? I mean, seriously, what counts is not what Dreyfus says in Israel, but what the Albanese government does right here at home to stop Jew hatred. Joining me every Monday again is the country's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan of The Australian. Greg, great to see you again. How do you assess this government's handling of foreign affairs?
Great to be with you, Andrew. And it's the only thing I missed over Christmas, really, was our chats. Look, I've got a column in tomorrow's Australian saying the Albanese government is one of the worst we've ever had in foreign affairs and national security. It's not the worst since World War II. You can't take the crown from Whitlam. That was the worst government we've ever had in foreign affairs and national security. But it's buggered our defence force. We've got a weaker defence force now than we had when they came into office. It has not only encouraged the terrorists in the Middle East, as Anthony Blinken said, one-sided criticism of Israel encourages Hamas to hold out and not do a deal, but it has connived a situation unintentionally where foreign policy is now dividing the Australian community on bitter, vicious, sectarian communal lines, which has never happened before in my lifetime. It is a bit of a joke regionally. I quote a senior Singapore official saying, how weak the Albanese government is. Nothing is happening on AUKUS. AUKUS is all hat, no cattle. And it just has no narrative or no coherence to anything it's doing. It's trying to silence independent think tanks like the Australian Strategic Policy Institute so that no one will ever be able to have an idea of what's really in the defence budget. I've never met an Australian government with more authoritarian instincts. It tries to shut down rather than answer criticisms. And it's shown no schmick of creativity in getting to know or having any influence with the new Trump administration.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, here we have been sent to Trump's inauguration, a foreign minister and an ambassador who both trashed Trump. I was actually told, Greg, a month and a half ago that senior Trump officials said they will not deal with Rudd. And it was interesting, Julie Bishop is the foreign minister, is today quoted saying, watch this space when asked if Rudd would stay as our ambassador. Watch this space. But meanwhile, in contrast, you got former Prime Minister Scott Morrison doing what Albanese won't and Rudd can't, visiting Trump in his home. Is Scott Morrison our obvious next ambassador to Washington?
Well, ScoMo has done very well with Trump, but he couldn't represent a Labor government because he'd be promoting all kinds of policies that he fundamentally disagrees with. So I'm a bit of a contrarian conservative on Rudd. I think Rudd has done a brilliant job as ambassador, and it's yet to be seen whether Trump will deal with him or not. I think Rudd and the other Labor figures were very undisciplined in their remarks about Trump. I mean, it's very foolish of them to make such undisciplined remarks about Trump. Now, so many people said bad things about Trump that Trump can be quite pragmatic about. J.D. Vance called him America's Hitler and he's now vice president. So we'll just have to see that as it goes. But Rudd is the only member of the Albanese team who is showing any continuing realism about China. And Rudd has made a huge effort to get to know senior Republicans, and he's the only member of the Albanese team doing anything of that. I mean, I think it's proper that our foreign minister should go to the inauguration, but there's still no plan for Albanese to meet Trump. It'll be a very weird meeting. Albanese maintained his sense of humour by saying he's likely to get on better with Trump than Peter Dutton would. Well, that's just kind of screamingly hilarious. It's just everything this government says in foreign affairs and defence, it just bears no relation to reality anymore. I mean, Albanese didn't offer us any rationale on why, Albanese only a couple of years ago, when he was a senior shadow minister, said Trump scared him shitless, if I can use such coarse language on a family program like this. Now he says he's going to get on much better with him than Peter Dutton will. Well, the whole thing is just kind of a joke. We're just seen as a rich, lazy country living off our past wealth with no significant defence assets. The only assets we have, the only assets we have are our geography and our alliance.
So true.
It is,
Just quickly, I'm running out of time, but I want to really quickly get something quickly before I go, because one of the things that's really offended Israel about this government is that it acts like Israel and Hamas are both responsible for this war, and Israel should just stop fighting Hamas. They've said again and again, ceasefire now. What I've seen almost no one report is an amazing announcement on the weekend by Fatah, which is the ruling party of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas over in the West Bank, blaming Hamas for the disaster of this war. It said Hamas is now attempting to stir security chaos in the West Bank, and there's been fighting there, of course, with Fatah, thereby continuing its policy that brought disaster upon the Palestinian people. We will not allow Hamas, which gambled with the interests and resources of the Palestinian people for Iran's benefit and caused the destruction of Gaza, to repeat its ventures in the West Bank. Now, here is a leading Palestinian group blaming Hamas and Iran for the war, and not the Jews, not Israel. This is a massive shift, but where's the reporting?
Well, not only that, Andrew, but that would be the view throughout the Arab world. That would be the view of every Arab government in the Gulf. I don't put too much creed in what Fatah says, to be honest, but certainly the Albanese government has had tremendous moral confusion and can't identify Australia's national interest. We have a tremendous national interest in degrading Iran's web of power and influence throughout the Middle East. Iran, the chief sponsor of the chief state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and also degrading Russian proxies in Syria and so on. All that has come about because of Israel's actions. The death in Gaza is a tragedy, but there could have been a ceasefire any time in the last 12 months if Hamas released the hostages. Why hasn't the Albanese government directed its moral outrage at that? And then in that utterly fatuous speech of Penny Wong, where she compared Israel to Russia and China, because they're both, they've all been noticed by the International Criminal Court, as though those United Nations playthings, which the United States sensibly won't have anything to do with, represent the rule of law instead of the rule of gross third world dictatorship politics, which is what dominates the UN. Now, the Albanese government knows all this, but it won't say boo because it's scared of Greens voters.
I'd like the Foreign Minister to talk as tough as Fatah about Hamas. Isn't that something? Greg Sheridan, thanks for your time.